In a shocking turn of events, well, not really shocking, is it? Keir Starmer has praised Margaret Thatcher. Keir Starmer praises Margaret Thatcher for bringing meaningful change to UK. Labour leader says former PM set loose unnatural entrepreneurialism in attempt to Tory voters to back him. Now, Starmer wrote a piece in The Telegraph appealing to Tory voters by convincing them that the Labour Party is the right choice. Across Britain, there are people who feel disillusioned, frustrated, angry, worried. Many of them have always voted Conservative, but feel that their party has left them, he said. I understand that. I saw that with my own party and acted to fix it. But I also understand that many will still be uncertain about Labour. I asked them to look at us again. Every moment of meaningful change in modern British politics begins with the realisation that politics must act in service of the British people, rather than dictating to them. I agree with that, actually. Margaret Thatcher sought to drag Britain out of its stupor by setting loose unnatural entrepreneurialism. Tony Blair reimagined a stale, outdated Labour Party into one that could seize the optimism of the late 90s. Yeah, in which Tony Blair quickly sucks the optimism out of the 90s with his government. A century ago, Clement Attlee wrote that Labour must be a party of duty and patriotism, not abstract theory. So this is Starmer not talking about the need for transformational politics akin to Thatcher. Jeremy Corbyn often said that the scale of change is needed like the Thatcher Revolution, but he never praised those reforms. Starmer is literally praising Thatcher for bringing out the entrepreneurial spirit. She destroyed this country. There was nothing, and there is nothing positive to say about Thatcher. This entrepreneurialism created right to buy, a public good which was housing, turned into a profit machine. She ripped up regulations in favour of corporate power. She decimated unions, which meant ordinary working people had less power and rights, all in the name of entrepreneurship. No Labour leader should dare say anything positive about that woman. We are still living in this neoliberal hellhole, and that's because no one has challenged Thatcherism, which is ironic because he talks about transformational politics, but he is anything but that. He's positioned himself, just like Blair, as an heir to Thatcher. Then he brings up Blair and praises his strategy of change to win. This is ahistorical. Labour were well ahead of the Tories in the polls under John Smith. He would have definitely won in 1997. Maybe not quite as big of a landslide, but I think that's a sacrifice worth making in order to keep basic Labour principles intact. And even when he mentions Attlee, he doesn't even bring up the biggest success of that government. It was national renewal through collectivism, which created the NHS and the welfare state. But actually, he talks about being patriotic. You know, Tory voters used the NHS too, you know. You can talk about these positive achievements. So basically, Starmer has identified transformational politics, but hasn't correctly identified the positives and the negatives. Now, since Starmer has rightfully been criticised for this, it hasn't stopped the briefcase melts crying. Seriously underrated former MP Mike Gapes says, looks like the Trot Stalinists and Corbynites on here are having a meltdown this morning again. They really don't get it. Labour does not win general elections by shouting louder at its existing supporters. It wins by appealing to disaffected Conservatives to switch to us. Find it hilarious that there are people on the left implying that Starmer is some secret Thatcherite. I mean, it's not a secret, he's pretty damn open about that. When a brief look at his legal career would show you he did more to fight her government than many of these armchair thinkers could dream of. Hashtag just saying. Let's look at his legal career, shall we? This is from 2012. British computer hacker Gary McKinnon would not be extradited to the US, Home Secretary Theresa May has announced. Mr. McKinnon, 46, who admits accessing US government computers but claims he was looking for evidence of UFOs, has been fighting extradition since 2002. Theresa May is quoted saying, he has Asperger's syndrome and suffers from depressive illness. The legal question before me is now whether the extent of that illness is sufficient to preclude extradition. After careful consideration of all the relevant material, I have concluded that Mr. McKinnon's extradition would give rise to such a high risk of him ending his life that a decision to extradite would be incompatible with Mr. McKinnon's human rights. Now, who was the director of public prosecutions at the time? Oh, that's right, former human rights lawyer, Keir Starmer, and he said he would do everything in his power to get him extradited. So it seems that Theresa May has a better moral compass than Starmer. We have another tweet. The left of the Labour Party wants to live under Tory rule forever. I would say that the right wing of the Labour Party wants to live under Tory rule forever, as long as it's under a red rosette. People are shocked that people is seeking to appeal to people who have previously voted Conservative. aren't serious people. Right, a few things to say, and then let's get into the meat of this. Nobody ever really asks the Conservative to appeal to Labour voters to win or move to the left. In fact, they have consistently moved more and more rightwards, yet still win elections. Thatcher represented the right wing of a right-wing party. She's not mainstream or centre. Most people want interventionist policies. She also won off the back of breaking with the status quo. Well, right now, Thatcherism is the status quo. Plus, Labour are 20 points ahead. The Tories have imploded. Most of Labour's popularity isn't because of them, but rather because the public are sick of the Tories. No one knows what Labour stands for, yet for many people, they are a better bet than the current government. And given that Labour are so far ahead, and unless there is a seismic event in politics, they're going to win. So Starmer doesn't need to do any of this. He just needs to steer the ship and not do anything controversial. But Starmer has time and time again proved that he hasn't needed to show how much the Labour Party has moved to the right, but he does it anyway. This isn't about strategy. This is because he is a right-wing politician. And I'd like to ask, how right-wing can Starmer go before people say, he's actually kind of sounding quite right-wing now, isn't he? The answer for Starmer supporters is there isn't. They don't have principles or policies. All they care is about the red team winning. But for us on the left, we are consistent. We actually care about policies. So when we see the Labour Party adopting Tory policies, then yes, we will attack Labour for it. Yet we're called Tory enablers or happy that the Tories are in power. What are your reasons for hating the Tories? To Liberals, to the right wing of the Labour Party, it's just purely vibes-based. It's competency and that's it. But for me, it's the anti-working class policies. It's the policies that increase poverty and homelessness, the two-child benefit policies. This is all abhorrent regardless of which party adopts them. Was it the last Labour leader who brought in former Tory MPs like Christian Wakeford? No, it was Starmer. It's not the left who are Tory enablers. It's the Labour right. Always have been and always will.